A man showed up at my door on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, carrying nothing but an old pencil case and a memory I had spent decades trying to bury. I was sorting velvet scraps across my work table when the intercom buzzed, sharp, urgent, almost alarming in the stillness of my house. I rarely accepted clients at home anymore, only the truly desperate ones. When I opened the door, he stood there dripping rain onto my welcome mat. Late 60s, maybe older. His gray coat clung to his shoulders, heavy with water. He didn't introduce himself, didn't even step inside. Instead, he opened the pencil case with careful hands. Inside, cushioned by yellowed cotton, lay a small photograph, the old passport-size kind with scalloped edges. "I need an exact replica," he said quietly, "of this little girl." I took the photo and lifted it toward the window, and the world tilted. The child staring back at me was my daughter, Valerie, about 5 years old, wearing the white polka dot dress I had sewn for her preschool graduation. I remembered staying up half the night stitching the hem straight because she wanted it to spin like a princess dress. But I had never seen this photograph before. It wasn't in our albums. I would have remembered. My hands began to tremble. "Is she alive?" I whispered before I could stop myself. He shook his head slowly. "I don't know. I only saw her once, 30 years ago." Valerie died at 17, a drunk driver, a wet highway, a phone call at 2:14 in the morning that split my life into two clean halves, before and after. The after was silent. For nearly 2 years, I barely spoke. I stopped answering calls, stopped opening curtains. The world kept moving, but I stepped off it. Then, one March afternoon, while searching for winter blankets, I found her old baby doll, the one she never liked much. One plastic arm was missing. Dust covered its blank face. And suddenly, I understood something with painful clarity. I could sew. I could create something that wouldn't leave, wouldn't grow up, wouldn't die. That spring, I opened a small online shop, Companion Dolls, for those who feel alone. Orders came almost immediately, mostly mothers who had buried children, sometimes widowers, almost always grief, but never, never a man with a photograph of someone else's child. Until now. I let him in and gestured toward the kitchen table. I placed a teapot between us like a quiet boundary. His name was Victor. He had been a taxi driver back in 1994. "She got lost in the park," he began, staring into his cup. "Running, crying. I found her near the fountain. My lungs forgot how to work. I remembered that day. God, I remembered. Izzy Park was crowded. Summer festivals, balloons, music drifting through the trees. One moment, Valerie's small hand was in mine. The next, it wasn't. 3 hours of pure terror followed. Police, strangers, my voice screaming her name until it broke. When they finally called saying she'd been found, I nearly collapsed. She was sitting on a bench, calmly finishing a popsicle. "Uncle Victor bought it," she told me with a sticky smile. I never asked for details. I didn't want to relive those hours. So I folded that day away like a nightmare and locked it somewhere deep. Now it was sitting across from me, drinking tea. "I drove her to the police station," Victor continued. "On the way, I bought her ice cream. She stopped crying, even let me take a photo with my old camera. I promised I'd give it to her parents. But when you arrived, everything was chaos. Shift change, paperwork. I had fares waiting. The photo stayed in my pocket." "For 30 years, I asked? He nodded. "I never had children. My wife died young. But that little girl, she trusted me, took my hand like she already knew I was safe. I kept the picture so I wouldn't forget her face." Something hot and silent began rising inside my chest. For 30 years, he had carried a piece of my daughter's life, a moment I didn't even know existed. He had been her rescuer, her Uncle Victor, and to me, he had been no one. The unfairness pressed against my ribs until I could barely breathe. "I won't make anything for you," I said suddenly, my voice cold. "Please leave." He didn't argue, just nodded, closed the pencil case, and stood. At the door, he paused. "I'm sorry, I never meant to disturb your peace." Then he stepped into the rain. I sat at that table until darkness swallowed the room. One thought circled endlessly. I just turned away the man who once saved my child. And worse, I realized why. Because seeing him meant facing the truth that I had failed her, if only for a moment. That I had looked away in a crowded park. I had buried that shame so deeply that even gratitude couldn't reach it. 3 days later, I found him. Taxi drivers still talk. It didn't take long. He lived in a tired apartment building on the edge of the city. When he opened the door and saw me, the color drained from his face, as if he expected accusations. "I'll make the doll," I said. He blinked. "But on one condition. You come every day. Tell me everything you remember about that afternoon. Every detail. What she said, how she laughed, everything." He swallowed and nodded. So began our strange routine. Every afternoon at 4, Victor sat on a small wooden stool in my workshop while I sewed. He spoke plainly, almost formally. She wore white socks. One had slipped down to her heel. Stitch. She told me she was looking for her mom with blue eyes. "Do you have blue eyes?" I said yes. She stopped crying after that. Stitch. She liked the cherry popsicle better than the orange. Each memory was a needle through fabric, sharp, necessary. Sometimes he remembered tiny things that shattered me. The breeze kept blowing a curl across her left ear. She got annoyed and tried to flatten it. I recreated that curl. The faint scrape on her knee, the tilt of her smile. It was agony, because with every word, he returned a fragment of the day I had erased. After he left each evening, I cried. From guilt, from gratitude, from the unbearable tenderness of hearing my daughter alive again in someone else's memory. A month later, the doll was finished. She sat on the shelf, legs dangling slightly, glass eyes bright in the afternoon light. For a moment, it felt like time had folded. "Here she is," I said softly when Victor arrived. "You can take her home." He stepped closer, looked, didn't move. Minutes passed. Then he turned to me. "I can't take her." My throat tightened. "Why not?" "She isn't mine," he said gently. "She never was. I only wanted to return that day to you, not as a nightmare, but as the day your daughter was found." Before I could respond, he placed the photograph on the table and walked out. This time, he didn't look back. The doll still sits in my studio, beside the photograph. But now, when I look at them, I don't see the accident that stole Valerie from me. I see her in the front seat of a taxi, swinging her legs, red popsicle staining her lips, laughing, trusting a stranger because his hands were kind. Victor forgave my anger, my rejection, my blindness. Now, slowly, painfully, I am learning to forgive myself. Healing doesn't arrive all at once. It comes quietly, stitch by stitch, and the doll watches in silence. Yet inside that silence lives an entire day I once threw away, now returned to me piece by piece, thread by thread.